We just came off what I consider to be one of the best episodes of this entire series, so the burning question for the week was, how on earth could this finale possibly follow that? Well, by taking us on a deeply personal journey, diving headfirst into the emotional stakes that truly make these characters and the story resonate. This finale barely had any action or punching in it. Instead, it was about the why behind the punches and the who they're fighting for and the tough decisions that come with saving lives. This is my breakdown of Invincible Season 4, Episode 8, the finale, which again didn't have much of any real action, but maybe one of the best written episodes to date. We have so much to discuss about this finale, so let's break it all down, full spoilers ahead. Now before we begin, I couldn't help but to think about Cecil's speech about how relieved he was that Earth was Viltrumite free for the first time in 20 years. Remember that when we break down this episode. Now, from the very first frame, this opening scene seriously gave me chills. We open with a vision, a nightmare scenario that is shortly revealed to be playing out in Mark's mind, as he envisions the remaining Viltrumites slowly breaching Earth's atmosphere. Thrag, cloaked in his iconic fur, watches from above, ready to claim the planet. We see the gravitational force from the Viltrumites sending shockwaves through the cities, the buildings crumbling, citizens crushed all within an instant. Total death, total destruction, as their bodies are covered in the blood of their victims. And to make matters worse, the ocean itself towering over the city, wiping away anything in its path, as Thrag finally descends from his ship to claim his grand prize. But again, thankfully this was all in Mark's head of what a full-scale Viltrumite invasion will look like on Earth, or maybe foreshadowing for much later down the road in the story. I'm not gonna lie, that opening had me going for a moment because I thought it was real, as well as we'll talk about another one I thought was real a little bit later in this breakdown. Now, we quickly learn that Mark and the others are still days away from Earth, and there's a chance that Thrag and his forces aren't even on Earth quite yet. But, as Zoe says, what exactly is their plan if they are on Earth? As Mark nor Nolan have the answer, as Zoe offers up some ideas, but again, Mark and Nolan remain silent, and that's because after their brutal, almost fatal encounter with Thrag, they know deep down that the chances of beating him are slim to none. Again, from the opening scene, this conversation on the ship, these scenes perfectly capture the mental toll this war has taken on both of them. Now it's time to see if the demon devil himself by the name of Thrag has conquered Earth as they've entered Earth's atmosphere. As Nolan makes a game plan, we see Mark flies right out the ship and decided to not wait for backup. He descends towards Earth and desperate to see, and what he finds is a miracle. Earth remains perfectly intact. He flies into the city only to find a perfectly normal regular day. The skies are clear, there are no Viltrumites to be found. The relief, both for Mark and for us, the audience watching, is pretty tense, but for Mark, the scars of that eternal dread remain. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, we see Alan dealing with his own burdens. As we know last week, he's now responsible for literally trillions of lives, worried about whether he can truly live up to the legacy of Thetis as the new leader of the Coalition of Planets. Now back on Earth, the reunion begins. Debbie couldn't be happier to see Mark, a truly heartwarming moment of a mother embracing her son. But the joy is tempered by the news that Oliver is still recovering out in space, leading to a perfectly understandable freakout from Debbie. It's here we see that Mark is actually suffering from PTSD. Now, in another moment that completely caught me off guard, he envisions Thrag appearing right behind Debbie and tearing her apart in a form of revenge for destroying his planet. Again, the vision at the beginning and this vision here, for 2 seconds, they had my heart. My heart literally stopped because I love Debbie, and seeing her die would have been heartbreaking, especially in that type of a situation. Again, these visions so far and throughout this episode just goes to show how deeply scarred Mark is and how every moment of peace is shadowed by the potential unimaginable horror of Thrag. Now, as Mark goes to check on Eve, he tells Debbie that Nolan's outside, and if she wants to talk to him, that's where she can find him. As we saw before they left for the battle, Debbie is justifiably cold as ice towards Nolan. She immediately questions his decision to leaving Oliver in space and why he returned to Earth at all despite her telling him not to. Nolan tells her that she would have been proud of her boys in action and how they saved the world. He's clearly trying to bridge the gap, trying to show her he's changed, but Debbie remains distant towards him and begins to walk away. But Nolan quickly steps in front of her and stops her. He implores her to stop treating him like a stranger, like she doesn't even know him. He reminds her of her own belief in giving others second chances, asking her to grant him that opportunity to let him show her who he truly is now. But Debbie stands her ground and lets him know that her heart is still closed off towards Nolan. And again, I 100% behind Debbie in this decision. I know we've seen Nolan make the turn, make the change on his redemption arc. But again, put yourself in Debbie's shoes. It is so hard to believe this man who you thought was a true person you can trust and love and your husband and the father of your child. But what he did in Chicago and after that, really is hard to kind of pick up those pieces. Meanwhile, there's joy as Zoe reunites with her father, who's beyond relieved to see that she survived, as Mark finally gets to see Eve, and the happiness of seeing loved ones returning home continues. Before moving on, man, I gotta give a shout out to Zoe, aka Tech Jacket, because yes, her technology is otherworldly and one of the most incredible high-end technologies in the planet and the universe, but at the end of the day, she is still a human under that armor. So Zoe did her damn thing, and I'm really excited to see what they do with Zoe moving forward in season 5. Next morning, after a much-needed night of catching up, we see Eve share some big news with Mark, and that's that her powers have returned, and she fills him in on everything she's been up to since he left. Now, we know that it's been a few months, and the last time we saw Eve that she was pregnant, but she tells Mark she's gained some weight because she hasn't been able to take care of herself much. More on that a little bit later. Now, Mark in turn opens up to Eve, expressing how he truly isn't okay, as he shares his fears that if the Viltrumites do decide to come to Earth, there's nothing that they could do to stop them. Now, it's been a couple weeks since we've seen and heard about Monster Girl and Robot, but in the canon of this particular story, it's been a couple months now. As we go to the GDA to find Cecil and Sinclair trying a trans-dimensional physics to find them. But unfortunately, they fell, and Sinclair was almost lost in another world before Donald shut down the machine. Again, this was all a part of them continuing to find Robot and Monster Girl. Now, I don't want to give anything away or spoil anything about this particular subplot, but I'll just let you all know it is very important for next season because, again, remember, it's been a few months that they've been gone for the humans, but time works differently on the planet they're trapped on, and let's just say, if they do return, things won't ever be the same. Now, back in space, we see Alan still hasn't found his voice as a leader, as the others argue about what they should do about the missing Viltrumites. The others want to continue Thetis' plans to completely eliminating all Viltrumites, including Mark, Oliver, and Nolan, despite their efforts in stopping and trying to kill Thrag. Now, we see Alan kind of steps up for himself and speaks up and assures them, the other leaders, that he will find the missing Viltrumites, and when they do, he will be the one to make the decision on what to do next. Back on Earth, Mark shares with William the destruction on Viltrum, but another terrifying vision hits him. This time, he sees Anissa killing his best friend, William.
Oh, man.
He's still processing whatever happened to him out there.
How can you tell?
Because I've seen that look before.
Where?
The mirror.
Later that night, the emotional roller coaster continues. Eve is about to tell Mark that she's pregnant, but before she can, Mark is struck by another vision, and just another horrible vision, as Thrag brutally kills Eve as Mark watches, helpless and terrified and powerless, to the visions of a future that he cannot control. But he collects himself and wants her to continue to finish what she was saying. As we watch Eve kind of panicking for a second, but she finally tells Mark the truth. Now, she tells Mark that she was pregnant, but she decided to get rid of the baby, and she explains what she went through while he was gone.
I was so alone. And the thought of going through everything by myself, I made a decision. But I should have... I don't know. Oh my God.
Man, this scene here was powerful. It was devastating. It was a heartbreaking moment, honestly. And to me, it just really speaks volumes about the impossible choices these characters, especially Eve, are forced to make in a world constantly under threats. And then you look at Mark realizing that he wasn't there for her when she made that decision when she needed him the most. This was just a reminder of the personal cost of being a superhero and in this moment being invincible. Now, speaking of personal costs, we check in with Debbie and we learn that while Mark and Oliver were all fighting for the planet, her and her relationship with Paul ended. It's revealed that they broke up because Debbie simply had too much on her mind and too much on her plate, and she was too worried about her sons. Now, Paul, being so understanding and being a nice guy and knowing how much stress she was under, especially now with Oliver alone in space, he suggests that she go to space to check on him. You know, the relationship between Paul and Debbie was nice to see for a moment, but I think Debbie's making the right decision because it's a testament to her unending stress and the loneliness she lives with, but also a moment of agency for her that we'll see pay off a little bit later in this episode. Now let's talk about Nolan, who just recovered from coming as close to death as he ever has before. We find him in a reflective headspace, visiting the very spot where he almost killed Mark, and also where his monstrous past collides with his current desire for change as Cecil shows up. For the first time that I can remember, Cecil admits being afraid of Nolan to Nolan as Nolan apologizes for all the suffering he's caused. It's a vulnerable moment for both of these characters as Nolan shares the intel about the missing Viltrumites. Now obviously Cecil's disappointed by their failed mission as he goes on about the threat of Viltrumites appearing at any moment means that humanity is still very much a target. Again, despite sharing his fears in Nolan, Cecil controlled that conversation, and he reminded Nolan of his past and his now responsibility he has to carry, not just for his family, but for humanity. Cecil, for all his lies and secret planning, he actually held Nolan accountable, and I respect that.
I risked my life out there, trying to win this war. I almost died.
Great start. Nearly died 2,341 more times, and then we can talk.
Now, back with Mark, he's not okay with the fact that, one, he wasn't there for the love of his life for one of the toughest decisions she'll probably ever have to make in her life, but also the fact that he failed in defeating the Viltrumites. To him, they're now an unchained ticking time bomb, giving them nothing left to lose. He's consumed by guilt and a sense of impending doom. But Eve gives Mark some much needed words of encouragement. She offers him comfort, strength, and some incredibly powerful words about loss and choice and the sacrifices they have to make. She reminds him that being a superhero means taking risk, making impossible choices, and sometimes sacrificing parts of themselves to protect those they love. Again, we didn't get a ton of Eve this season, which is unfortunate because she is one of my favorite characters, but I really do love how, compared to the comics, Eve has so much more agency. She's such more of a fully fleshed out, multi-dimensional character, and I do really look forward to seeing what they do with her moving forward. But I thought that speech and that, again, those words of encouragement she gave Mark was one of the more powerful moments of this episode. Now outside, Nolan tells Mark that the ship is almost complete to detect any oncoming Viltrumite activity, and once completed, he'll be headed back to space to check on Oliver. Now Debbie comes outside and lets everyone know that she'll be going to join Nolan to check on Oliver and leaves the house with Mark to look after. As we watch Debbie hesitate to fly into the sky with Nolan as they say their goodbyes. Now on the ship, Nolan shows Debbie the view of Earth. We see that he makes a move to embrace her, but he stops himself. Nolan knows that he hasn't earned that yet. His path to redemption isn't just about fighting bad guys and saving the world, it's also about rebuilding his shattered trust with his family. I am very excited to see what happens between Nolan and Debbie in space and see if he can work his way back into her heart. But again, shout out to Debbie and shout out to Nolan, and who knows, maybe they'll get back together come season 5. Now at the GDA, we see Mark and Cecil talk about Earth's defenses, and Mark has his last nightmare vision of Thrag actually killing Cecil. Now this vision has Mark finally accepting some mental health from Cecil and the GDA. Now, a couple things I want to point out about this scene. So number one, Mark visions were about people he cared for and people he loved. So the fact that he saw Cecil dying and him being so affected by that, that tells us that he does, even though despite their differences from the past, Mark still cares for Cecil. Now, the second thing I want to bring up is what a lot of people have talked about and joked about in the last few weeks. When Mark finally sees Cecil, he's going to kill him for what happened with Conquest. So I was shocked that Mark didn't bring up Conquest in their conversations, that obviously he was alive, he thought he was dead, but he had to kill him again. But obviously we know that Mark's got a lot on his mind right now, so maybe that's a discussion for later on. Now, as we come to the end of this very emotionally heavy finale, we see Mark taking advice from Eve to go on a flight to clear his mind. As we watch Mark flying around, it's peaceful, it's calm, and he gets some time to himself to be with his thoughts. Now, as Mark descends back to Earth, he sees Thrag floating, and this time around, this isn't a vision because Thrag is actually here.
Yes. We are here.
Mark immediately attacks Thrag, but like before, Mark punches doesn't affect him. Thrag tosses Mark back and tells him to stop because he's done nothing to this planet quite yet, as he shares his responsibilities as a Grand Regent of only 37 remaining Viltrumites. He explains how things moving forward on Earth will go, as he basically tells Mark, we're moving in and you're going to let us, and they will have to coexist with one another. We see this montage of Krieg, Anissa, and Lucan blending into society, and if Mark or Nolan or the Coalition try to stop them, billions will suffer. The choice is simple, either annihilation to Earth or total occupation. Now Mark says no at first, that's the hero in him and the hero thing to do, but then he sees those nightmares that he had throughout this episode again. He realizes he cannot pay the price of a dead planet. He accepts his terms, he chooses survival over endless death and destruction. As Mark says to himself what he has done, we see Thrag tells him that he saved the lives of every living person on this planet, and he tells Mark that he'll never hear or see from him again as he flies off. Man, what did you all think of Mark's choice? Was it the right call, or did he just sign away the future of the human race? I gotta say now, I love that scene so damn much. I love Thrag. I love his regalness. I love that conversation. I love the decision. I think Mark made the right choice, and I kind of know what's going to happen moving forward, but I love that scene to pieces. But just when you think the tension couldn't get higher, we are hit with the post-credit scene for this finale. We see Alan is still struggling with the weight of being the leader of the Coalition as Talia brings him a final message from the late great Thetis. Thetis shares with him his contingency plan, aka the nuclear option. He tells Alan about the perfection of this new version of the Scourge virus. The man who dedicated his life to stopping the Viltrumite Empire is now forcing the next leader to potentially commit mass genocide just to assure that the Empire dies. As he tells Alan that he needs to use the virus no matter the cost, man, the moral stakes for season 5 just went through the roof. So before I get into my final thoughts about this finale and the season overall, I need to know what you all think about where did Thrag go? He told Mark that he will never hear from him or see him again, which will not happen. They will be encountering each other again. But where do you all think Thrag went? But also, what about the Viltrumites on Earth? Are they going to be like the Eternals? Are they just going to not intervene with anything? Like if Dinosaurs is trying to destroy the world, or any one of the B-list or C-list villains try to do anything, will they just watch the world burn down, or will they intervene? Will they use their powers and strength and slowly become kind of heroes of their own? Or again, will the Viltrumites that are on Earth, which are 37 of them, will they just watch things go by and not do anything because they don't want to be sought out as Viltrumites? But again, there's a whole bunch of questions and theories about what it means for these other Viltrumites to live on Earth. What does Cecil have to say about that? What does Nolan have to say about that? What does Alan have to say about that? What do the Guardians have to say? I mean, there's just endless stories that can go on with this new lifestyle of the Viltrumites on Earth. So overall, I freaking love this finale, man. Again, I know there wasn't any action, but I can go without action when you give me great writing, great storytelling, and I thought this finale just changed everything. Mark is now forced to play nice with the people who want to destroy everything he loves, and Alan is holding a weapon that could end the conflict, but destroy his own morality in the process. Again, that's just such great writing. What the finale truly, to me, excelled at was exploring the quieter, more personal side of the superhero storytelling that I love. To me, this was a great reminder that the biggest battles aren't always fought with fists, but with fear, with grief, with desperate hope for redemption, and the unwavering love for those that these heroes protect. From Mark's PTSD to Nolan's quest for forgiveness, Debbie's strength, Eve's revelation, this episode just wasn't a setup for next season, but instead, in my eyes, it was a great deep dive into the emotional core of Invincible, leaving us incredibly desperate to see what happens next season. The episode was also about the emotional cost of being a hero in my eyes, and the impossible choices and the ever-present threat of the Viltrumites. So overall, as far as the season goes, this is maybe I'm just thinking in my head, maybe my third, maybe second favorite season, because season 1 will always be goated. I really enjoy season 2. I love season 3. Yeah, right now, I think this is my third favorite season. And as far as like the highs and lows, even though I wasn't as like rough on these episodes as everyone else was, I know everyone hated episode 4. You can watch my review on it. I had fun with it, but I can acknowledge it's the weakest of the 8, as well as episode 3, with Machine Head and catching up with Titan. Like, that stuff was okay, but I would say 3 and 4 are probably the weakest episodes of this season. But episode 1 was great. Episode 2 was one of my favorites, with the origins of the Scourge virus and Alan and Nolan working together to collect all the artifacts. Episode 5 obviously was great, with the death of Conquest. Episode 6 with Nolan and Oliver bonding while Mark was healing. And then the fight on the Coalition planet. And then episode 7 was goated, one of the greatest episodes of all time for this show. And again, I thought this finale was excellent. With all that being said, y'all, that will conclude my breakdown of Invincible Season 4, Episode 8, the finale. Thank you all for watching or listening to this week's breakdown. If you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, thank you so much. And thank you for all the support this entire season. I've been covering the show from the very beginning. I love this show. I love the community, even though sometimes the fandom can be very annoying with the complaints of the animation and people being nerfed. But at the end of the day, I know you all are all fans and I appreciate the fandom. So if you all, number one, have stayed around to this point of video, thank you. If you've watched all my breakdowns this season, thank you. And do me a favor, put in the comments right now, hashtag Thrag will return in Avengers Doomsday. But no, in all seriousness, put in the comments right now, hashtag thank you. If you all are watching on YouTube, please consider liking the video, hitting the hype button on this video, sharing your thoughts on this episode, on this season, which season is your favorite, what was your favorite episode this season, but also share the video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show. And last but not least, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel today. For my podcast listeners, anyone listening on Apple or Spotify, wherever you all get your podcasts from, I appreciate you all. Let me know your thoughts of this episode in the comments, but also consider following the podcast, and I would love it if you all can give me a 5-star review. All right, we closed the chapter on this 4th season of Invincible, y'all, but we are still covering The Boys, Euphoria, we got Daredevil, and we got so many more movies and shows to look forward to. So again, stick around by subscribing. Thank you all for the support. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next breakdown.